Marcus Reed wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag and looked at the broken engine parts scattered across his workbench. The mining station's main generator had been acting up again, and someone had to fix it. That someone was always him. He was the only mechanic on Station Omega 7, a small outpost sitting on the edge of human space where nobody important ever came and nothing exciting ever happened. The station manager had asked him to check the outer sensor arrays today. Something about power fluctuations in Sector 12. Marcus grabbed his toolkit and headed for the maintenance tunnels that ran through the station's outer ring. The tunnels were dark and cramped, filled with pipes and cables that hummed with electricity. He had walked these same tunnels hundreds of times before. Marcus found the problem quickly enough. A power coupling had burned out, probably from the last solar storm that hit the system. He pulled out his tools and started working. The repair was simple, but it would take time. As he worked, he heard a strange sound coming from somewhere outside the station. It sounded like scratching or scraping against the hull. He stopped working and listened. The sound came again, weaker this time. Marcus knew every sound the station made. This was something new, something that did not belong. He finished the repair quickly and made his way to the nearest observation window. The thick glass looked out into the darkness of space, but he could see nothing unusual. The scratching sound came again, closer now. Marcus followed the sound to the tunnels until he reached an emergency airlock near the station's outer edge. The sound was coming from just outside. Something was out there, and it sounded hurt. Marcus thought about calling security, but the station only had 2 security guards, and they were both probably asleep. He thought about calling the station manager, but the man would just tell him to ignore it. Whatever was out there might be dying while he stood around thinking about what to do. He put on an emergency suit and cycled through the airlock. The station's outer hull stretched away in both directions, a maze of pipes, antennas, and sensor arrays. Marcus activated his suit's lights and looked around. At first he saw nothing. Then he spotted movement near a cluster of communication dishes about 50 meters away. Marcus made his way carefully across the hull, using the safety lines that connected the various equipment pods. As he got closer, he could see what was making the noise. A creature was trapped between 2 of the dishes, one of its limbs caught in the metal framework. The creature was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It was about the size of a large dog, but its body was long and lean like a lizard. Its skin was covered in pale scales that seemed to glow faintly in the light from his suit. 2 large wings extended from its back, but one of them was badly damaged. The wing membrane was torn in several places and twisted at an unnatural angle. The creature's head was narrow and elegant, with large eyes that watched Marcus with intelligence. When it saw him approaching, it made a sound that was part growl and part whimper. It was clearly afraid, but also in too much pain to flee. Marcus stopped a few meters away and spoke softly, even though he knew the creature could not understand him. "Easy there, buddy. I am not going to hurt you. Let me see what I can do to help." The creature watched him carefully as he moved closer. Its trapped limb was wedged between 2 pieces of metal that had been bent by some impact. Probably a piece of space debris had hit the dishes, and the creature had been caught in the damage. Marcus could see that the limb was not broken, just stuck. He pulled out a small pry bar from his toolkit and carefully worked to bend the metal back. The creature flinched when he touched the framework, but did not try to attack him. After several minutes of careful work, Marcus managed to free the trapped limb. The creature immediately pulled back, favoring the injured leg. But the real problem was the damaged wing. Marcus could see that several of the thin bones that supported the wing membrane were broken. Without proper treatment, the creature would never fly again. And in space, being unable to move quickly usually meant death. Marcus looked at the creature and made a decision that would change both their lives, though neither of them knew it at the time. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward the airlock. "Let me take a look at that wing." The creature seemed to understand his intention, if not his words. It followed him slowly back to the airlock, moving awkwardly on 3 good limbs while keeping the injured wing folded against its body. Getting through the airlock was tricky since the creature was larger than Marcus had first thought, but they managed it. Once inside the station, Marcus led the creature to his workshop. The artificial gravity made movement easier for both of them. Marcus cleared a space on his largest workbench, and the creature climbed up without being asked. It seemed to trust him now, though it watched his every movement with those large, intelligent eyes. Marcus examined the damaged wing carefully. 3 of the wing bones were clearly broken, and the membrane was torn in 4 places. He had never worked on anything like this before, but the basic principles were the same as any other repair job. Find the broken parts, fix what could be fixed, and replace what could not be fixed. He started by cleaning the wounds with antiseptic from the station's medical kit. The creature flinched but held still. Then Marcus began the delicate work of setting the broken bones. He used thin metal rods from his parts bin as splints, carefully aligning each broken bone and securing it in place with surgical tape from the medical kit. The wing membrane was harder to repair. Marcus tried several different materials before settling on a thin plastic sheeting that was both flexible and strong. He cut patches to cover each tear and used medical adhesive to attach them. The patches would not be permanent, but they would hold until the natural membrane could heal. The work took most of the night. By the time Marcus finished, both he and the creature were exhausted. The creature's wing was now held in a complex framework of splints and supports that would keep the bones aligned while they healed. It looked strange, but it would work. Marcus set up a comfortable space for the creature in a corner of his workshop, using old blankets and cushions from the station's storage areas. He brought water and tried several different types of food until he found something the creature would eat. It seemed to prefer the protein bars from the emergency rations. Over the next few days, Marcus checked on the creature regularly. He changed the bandages, adjusted the splints, and made sure it was eating and drinking. The creature grew more comfortable with him, sometimes making soft chirping sounds when he approached. Marcus found himself talking to it while he worked, even though it could not understand him. "You know, buddy, I have never seen anything like you before," Marcus said one afternoon while adjusting one of the wing splints. "I wonder where you came from. Some planet with lots of flying creatures. I bet. Must be nice to soar through the sky whenever you want." The creature tilted its head and made a sound that almost seemed like a response. Marcus smiled and continued his work. He had always been better with machines than with people, but somehow this alien creature felt like a friend. After 2 weeks, the wing bones had healed enough to remove some of the splints. The creature was growing restless, often looking toward the workshop's small window that showed the stars outside. Marcus knew it would want to leave soon, and he knew he would have to let it go. On the morning of the 3rd week, Marcus came to his workshop and found the creature standing near the window, its repaired wing fully extended. The wing looked strange with its patches and remaining splints, but it appeared functional. The creature looked at Marcus and made a series of sounds that seemed almost like speech. "I think you are trying to say goodbye," Marcus said. "Well, I guess it is time. Your wing looks good enough to fly, and you probably have somewhere important to be." Marcus led the creature back through the tunnels to the same airlock where he had first brought it inside. The creature seemed to know the way and moved eagerly toward the exit. Once they were both outside on the station's hull, the creature moved to an open area and spread both wings wide. It looked back at Marcus one last time and made a soft sound that might have been thanks. Then it pushed off from the station's hull and flew away into the darkness of space. Marcus watched until he could no longer see the pale glow of its scales against the stars. When Marcus returned to his workshop, he found something on the workbench where the creature had been resting. 3 small scales, each one perfectly white and slightly warm to the touch. They seemed to glow with their own inner light. Marcus picked them up and examined them closely, but he could not figure out what made them glow. He put the scales in a small box on his desk and went back to work. The station's main computer had been acting up, and someone needed to fix it. Within a few days, he was too busy with repairs to think much about the strange creature he had helped. Within a few weeks, the memory began to fade like an old dream. Marcus Reed continued his quiet life as the station's mechanic, fixing what was broken and keeping the machines running. He never threw away the 3 glowing scales, but he gradually forgot where they had come from. They became just another odd item in his collection of spare parts and curiosities. He had no way of knowing that his simple act of kindness would one day save the human race. 15 years had passed since Marcus Reed found the strange creature outside station Omega-7. He was no longer the young mechanic who had worked alone in the outer tunnels. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and deep lines marked his face from years of squinting at broken machinery. His hands were permanently stained with grease and oil, the marks of a man who had spent his life fixing things that other people had broken. Marcus now owned his own repair shop on Haven Station, a busy trading post that sat at the crossroads of 3 major shipping lanes. The station was much larger than Omega. 7 had been, with thousands of residents and hundreds of ships passing through every week. His shop, Reed's Repairs, occupied a prime location near the main docking bays where cargo haulers and passenger ships came to refuel and restock. The shop was everything Marcus had ever wanted. It had proper equipment, good lighting, and enough space to work on multiple ships at once. He employed 2 apprentices now, young people who reminded him of himself when he was starting out. They were eager to learn, and Marcus enjoyed teaching them the tricks of the trade that he had learned over the years. Marcus had built a reputation for honest work and fair prices. Ship captains would travel out of their way to bring their vessels to Reed's Repairs because they knew Marcus would tell them the truth about what needed fixing and what could wait. He never cheated customers or sold unnecessary repairs like some mechanics did. Word of mouth was the best advertising in the shipping business, and Marcus had plenty of satisfied customers willing to recommend his services. The work was steady and profitable. Marcus lived in a small apartment above his shop, simple but comfortable. He had no family to speak of, no wife or children. His parents had died years ago, and he had never been close to his siblings who lived on distant colonies. His life revolved around his work, his apprentices, and the steady parade of broken machinery that found its way to his door. Most evenings, Marcus would sit in his apartment and listen to the news broadcast from across human space. The reports were not encouraging. Tensions were rising between human colonies and several alien confederations over trade routes and mining rights. There had been several small conflicts in recent years, nothing approaching a full war, but enough to make everyone nervous. The newsreader spoke of new alien empires rising in distant sectors, species that humans had never encountered before. Some were friendly and wanted to trade. Others were hostile and viewed human expansion as a threat to their own territories. The galaxy was becoming more crowded and more dangerous as different species encountered each other for the first time. Marcus paid attention to these reports, but they seemed far removed from his daily life. Haven Station was in relatively safe space, protected by both human patrol ships and the neutral status that came with being a major trading hub. The various alien species that passed through the station were merchants and travelers, not warriors looking for trouble. Still, Marcus noticed changes over the years. More ships carried weapons now, even the civilian cargo haulers. Captains were more nervous, more likely to jump at unexpected sounds or movement. The station security force had been doubled, and new defensive systems had been installed around the docking bays. The most disturbing reports came from the outer colonies, the settlements on the edge of human space where Marcus had once worked. Several outposts had gone silent in recent months, their communications suddenly cutting off without explanation. Search and rescue missions found the stations abandoned but undamaged, as if the residents had simply vanished into space. Some people blamed pirates or raiders, but the missing colonies had nothing worth stealing. Others suspected alien involvement, but no one could explain why an alien race would want to capture humans from remote outposts while leaving valuable equipment behind. The mystery added to the growing sense of unease that seemed to hang over human space like a dark cloud. Marcus tried not to worry about things he could not control. He had learned long ago that a man could drive himself crazy thinking about all the problems in the galaxy. Better to focus on what was in front of him, the broken engines and faulty systems that he could actually fix. His days followed a comfortable routine. He would wake early and check the overnight messages from ship captains requesting repairs. Then he would review the work schedule with his apprentices, Jake and Lisa, making sure they understood what needed to be done and in what order. The 3 of them would work steadily through the day, taking breaks only for quick meals and the occasional cup of coffee. Jake was 22 and had been with Marcus for 3 years. He was good with his hands and had a natural understanding of how machines worked. Lisa was newer, only 6 months on the job, but she was quick to learn and ask intelligent questions. Marcus enjoyed watching them develop their skills, remembering his own early days when everything seemed mysterious and complicated. The work itself was satisfying in a way that Marcus found hard to explain to other people. There was something deeply pleasing about taking a broken machine and making it work again. Every repair was like solving a puzzle, figuring out what had gone wrong and how to fix it. Marcus had always been better with machines than with people, and his shop was a place where that skill was valued and appreciated. The ships that came to Reed's repairs were as varied as their crews. There were massive cargo haulers that carried goods between star systems, sleek passenger liners that transported wealthy travelers, small scout ships used by explorers and scientists, and everything in between. Each type of ship had its own unique problems and requirements. Marcus had worked on human ships for so long that he could diagnose most problems just by listening to the engine sounds. But alien ships were different, built according to engineering principles that sometimes made no sense to human mechanics. Over the years, he had learned to work on vessels from a dozen different species, each with their own technology and design philosophy. The alien customers were usually polite but distant. They paid their bills and left without much conversation. Marcus suspected they preferred to deal with their own kind when possible, but sometimes his shop was the only option available. He had learned enough basic phrases in several alien languages to handle simple transactions, though he still relied on translation devices for complex technical discussions. One type of ship that Marcus had never worked on was military vessels. Both human and alien warships had their own maintenance crews and rarely needed outside help. When they did dock at Haven Station, it was usually just for supplies and fuel. The crew stayed aboard their ships and did not mingle with the civilian population. But lately, Marcus had noticed more military traffic passing through the station. Human patrol ships made regular stops now, their captains meeting privately with the station administrator. The alien military vessels were less common but more impressive, massive ships with strange designs and weapons that Marcus could not identify. The increased military presence made everyone nervous, though no one talked about it openly. The station's civilian population went about their business as usual, but there was an underlying tension that had not been there before. People spoke in quieter voices and seemed more aware of their surroundings. Marcus found himself thinking more often about the old days on Station Omega-7, when life had been simpler and the galaxy had seemed less threatening. He remembered the quiet hours spent working alone in the maintenance tunnels, the satisfaction of solving problems without anyone looking over his shoulder. Sometimes he missed that simplicity, even though he knew his current life was better in every measurable way. The 3 glowing scales that the strange creature had left behind still sat in a small box on his desk. Marcus had moved them from shop to shop over the years, never quite sure why he kept them. They still glowed with the same soft light, though he had never figured out what made them luminescent. Sometimes he would take them out and examine them, trying to remember where they had come from. The memory of the creature itself had faded almost completely. Marcus could vaguely recall helping some kind of injured animal, but the details were lost in the fog of 15 years and countless other experiences. He had no idea that the creature had been intelligent or that it had come from a species that would soon change the course of human history. On quiet evenings when business was slow, Marcus would sometimes stand at the observation windows of his shop and look out at the stars. Ships came and went in the distance, their running lights creating brief streaks of color against the darkness. It was a peaceful sight, one that reminded him of all the possibilities that existed in the vast galaxy beyond Haven Station. But peace was becoming harder to find as reports of conflict and tension filled the news broadcasts. Marcus wondered how long it would be before the troubles reached even this relatively safe corner of space. He hoped his small repair shop would be able to continue operating normally, serving the needs of honest traders and travelers who just wanted to get from one place to another without getting caught up in galactic politics. Marcus Reed had no way of knowing that the galaxy's troubles were about to arrive at his doorstep in the form of a massive alien fleet. He had no memory of the injured creature he had once saved, and no reason to suspect that his long-ago act of kindness was about to determine the fate of the entire human race. Marcus was working under the engine housing of a cargo hauler when the alarm started screaming. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard on Haven Station, a deep wailing that seemed to come from every speaker in the complex at once. He rolled out from under the ship and looked at his apprentices with confusion. Jake dropped his wrench and stared at the ceiling where red warning lights were flashing in sequence. "What is that?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the noise. Lisa ran to the shop's main window and pressed her face against the reinforced glass. "There are ships out there," she called back to them. "Lots of ships. I have never seen anything like them." Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls and joined her at the window. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dozens of massive vessels hung in space around Haven Station, their dark hulls blotting out sections of the star field. The ships were enormous, each one easily 10 times the size of the largest cargo hauler Marcus had ever seen. Their design was unlike anything in human engineering, with flowing curves and organic shapes that looked more grown than built. The station's communication system crackled to life with the voice of Administrator Walsh, though his usual calm demeanor was replaced by barely controlled panic. "All residents remain in your current locations. Do not attempt to leave the station. All security personnel report to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill." Marcus felt his heart pounding as he watched more ships emerge from the darkness. These were not explorers or traders. The vessels bristled with weapons that looked capable of reducing Haven Station to scrap metal in minutes. This was an invasion fleet, and they were completely surrounded. "Should we try to get to the evacuation pods?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. Marcus shook his head. "Too late for that. Besides, where will we go? Those ships have us completely cut off." He tried to keep his voice steady for the sake of his apprentices, but inside, he was just as terrified as they were. The alien ships moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of military discipline. Smaller vessels detached from the larger ones and headed toward the station's docking bays. Marcus could see that each of the smaller ships was still larger than most human vessels, their hulls gleaming with what looked like natural armor plating. The station shuddered as the first alien ship made contact with Docking Bay 7, just 2 levels below Marcus's shop. The artificial gravity fluctuated for a moment, making all 3 humans grab onto nearby equipment for support. Then everything stabilized, but the normal background hum of the station systems had changed. Something was different. Marcus moved to his workbench and turned on his emergency radio, cycling through the frequencies to find any information about what was happening. Most channels were filled with static or panicked voices, speaking too quickly to understand. Finally, he found a security channel that was still functioning. "Bay 7 is breached," a voice reported with professional calm. "Unknown alien forces are boarding to the primary airlock. They appear to be armed but have not opened fire. All security teams maintain defensive positions but do not engage unless directly threatened." More voices joined the channel, reporting similar boardings at Bays 3, 12, and 15. The aliens were taking control of the station systematically, moving through the docking areas with military precision. But strangely, there were no reports of violence or casualties. Marcus turned to his apprentices. "Stay close to me and do exactly what I say. These beings might be hostile, but they have not started shooting yet. That means they might want something other than our deaths." Lisa nodded nervously while Jake picked up a heavy wrench, as if the tool might provide some protection against beings capable of crossing interstellar space. Marcus gently took the wrench from him and set it aside. "If they wanted to kill us, we would already be dead. Acting aggressive will only give them a reason to change their minds." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the station's corridors, accompanied by voices speaking a language that sounded like controlled thunder. The universal translators that were built into the station's communication system were struggling to process the alien speech, producing only fragments of meaning. "Secure, no resistance, primary objective, maintain order." Marcus realized that the aliens were communicating in their own language while also monitoring human communications. They understood what the station's residents were saying, but they were not making any effort to explain their intentions. This was a military operation, carried out with the efficiency of a force that had done this many times before. The footsteps grew louder, moving to the commercial district where Marcus's shop was located. He could hear doors opening and closing as the aliens systematically searched each business. They were getting closer. "Remember," Marcus whispered to his apprentices, "hands visible, no sudden movements, and let me do the talking." The footsteps stopped outside Reed's repairs. Marcus could see shadows moving past the frosted glass of his shop's entrance. Then the door opened without any attempt to use the entry controls. The aliens had simply overridden the electronic locks with technology that was far more advanced than anything humans possessed. The first being to enter was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a body that combined the best features of reptile and warrior. Its skin was covered in scales that ranged from deep gold to rich bronze, each one perfectly formed and positioned. The creature wore armor that seemed to be a blend of advanced technology and natural protection, with plates that followed the contours of its muscular frame. But it was the being's head that commanded attention. The skull was elongated and elegant, with large eyes that showed intelligence and purpose. When it opened its mouth to speak, Marcus could see rows of sharp teeth designed for a carnivorous diet. 2 smaller horns curved back from its forehead, and its ears were pointed and mobile, constantly adjusting to track different sounds. Humans present in this location will identify themselves. The being said in perfect standard English, though its voice carried harmonic undertones that no human throat could produce. Marcus stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I am Marcus Reed. This is my repair shop. These are my apprentices, Jake and Lisa. We are not armed and we mean no harm." The alien studied with eyes that seemed to look right through him. "You repair mechanical devices." "Yes, mostly ships, but other equipment as well." 2 more aliens entered the shop, these slightly smaller than the first, but no less impressive. They moved with the fluid grace of natural predators, their heads turning constantly to scan for threats. Marcus noticed that all 3 beings wore similar armor, but the first one had additional markings that suggested higher rank. "Your species has limited technological advancement," the leader observed, looking around the shop at Marcus's tools and equipment. "Yet you maintain adequate craftsmanship standards." Marcus was not sure if that was a compliment or an insult, so he simply nodded. "We do our best with what we have." The alien leader made a sound that might have been approval. "You will continue your work. New management protocols will be provided. Compliance with regulations will ensure your continued operation." "New management?" Marcus asked, though he was afraid. He already knew the answer. This station now operates under the authority of the White-Scale Empire. Existing businesses may continue if they prove useful to Imperial interests. Those that do not will be reassigned. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The White-Scale Empire. He had heard rumors about this organization, whispers from ship captains who claimed to have encountered their forces in distant sectors. The reports had been fragmentary and contradictory, but they all agreed on one thing. The White-Scale Empire was expanding rapidly, and they did not ask permission before taking control of new territory. "What about the people who live here?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The alien leader turned his attention to her, and Marcus was impressed that she did not flinch under that intense gaze. "Residents who demonstrate value to the Empire will be protected and provided for. Those who prove disruptive will be relocated. Violence will not be necessary if cooperation is maintained." Jake found his voice. "What if we do not want to cooperate?" The alien's expression did not change, but there was something in its tone that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Cooperation is not optional. However, the Empire is not unreasonable. Those who contribute useful skills will find life under Imperial rule to be comfortable and secure." Marcus realized that this was not a conquest in the traditional sense. The aliens were not interested in enslaving humans or destroying their civilization. They were incorporating Haven Station into their empire, treating it as an acquisition rather than a prize of war. It was coldly practical and somehow more disturbing than outright hostility would have been. "We understand," Marcus said quickly, before either of his apprentices could say something that might change the alien's attitude. "We will cooperate with the new management." The leader nodded once. "Wise. An Imperial administrator will arrive within 2 standard days to assess your facility and assign appropriate work orders. Maintain normal operations until then." The 3 aliens turned and left as suddenly as they had arrived, moving on to the next business in their systematic survey of the station. Marcus waited until he could no longer hear their footsteps before allowing himself to slump against his workbench. "What just happened?" Jake asked, his face pale with shock. "We were just conquered," Marcus replied, trying to process the implications of what they had experienced. "But we are still alive, and they seem to want us to keep working. That is more than we could have hoped for." Lisa looked out the window at the alien ships that still surrounded the station. "Do you think they will really let us continue living normally?" Marcus followed her gaze to the massive vessels that now controlled their fate. "I do not know, but we're going to find out." 2 days passed in an atmosphere of nervous tension that hung over Haven Station like a thick fog. Marcus tried to maintain his normal routine, working on the ships that still needed repairs while waiting for the Imperial Administrator to arrive. His apprentices stayed close to the shop, afraid to venture into corridors where alien soldiers patrolled with quiet efficiency. The White Scale forces had taken control of all critical systems within hours of their arrival. The station's communications, power grid, and life support now operated under Imperial oversight. Yet daily life continued much as it had before, with shops opening, people go to work, and the basic functions of the trading post carrying on under new management. Marcus had expected chaos and resistance, but the station's population seemed to accept their situation with resigned practicality. Most residents were traders, merchants, and service workers who had seen enough of the galaxy to know when fighting was pointless. The White Scale Empire had demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority without firing a single shot. Resistance would only bring suffering without changing the outcome. On the third morning after the arrival, Marcus was calibrating a navigation computer when Jake burst through the shop's entrance with excitement written across his face. "Marcus, you need to see this. The Imperial Administrator is coming, and it is not what we expected." Marcus set down his tools and followed Jake to the main window. A procession was moving through the commercial district, but it was unlike anything he had seen during the initial invasion. At the center walked a being that commanded immediate attention, not through size or weapons, but through sheer presence. The creature was definitely one of the dragon-like aliens, but its scales were pure white instead of the bronze and gold that Marcus had seen before. The being moved with fluid grace that suggested both physical power and absolute confidence. Its armor was more elaborate than that worn by the soldiers, with intricate designs that seemed to flow like liquid metal across its surface. But what struck Marcus most was the creature's bearing. This was clearly a leader, someone accustomed to command and respect. The other aliens in procession maintained precise distances from their superior, their body language showing deference that bordered on reverence. "That must be some kind of prince or general," Lisa whispered, joining them at the window. "Look how the others treat him." Marcus nodded, though something about the white-scaled alien seemed familiar in a way he could not explain. The feeling was vague and distant, like trying to remember a dream from years past. He shook his head and focused on the practical concerns of the moment. The procession stopped directly in front of Reed's repairs. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he realized the Imperial Administrator was planning to visit his shop personally. This was either very good news or very bad news, and he would not know which until it was too late to change anything. The White Scale being approached the shop's entrance while its escorts remained outside. Marcus straightened his coveralls and tried to look professional as the door opened. The alien had to duck slightly to fit through the human-sized entrance, a reminder of the physical differences between their species. Up close, the creature was even more impressive than it had appeared from a distance. Its white scales had an almost luminescent quality, as if they generated their own soft light. Its eyes were a striking blue color that seemed to shift and change like deep water. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies Marcus could feel in his chest. "You are Marcus Reed," the being said. It was not a question. "Yes, I am. This is my repair shop. How may I help you?" The alien studied him with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. Those blue eyes seemed to be searching for something, examining not just his face, but something deeper. The silence stretched for several seconds before the creature spoke again. "You do not remember me." Marcus felt confusion wash over him. "I am sorry, but I do not think we have met before. I would certainly remember meeting someone from your species." The alien's expression shifted in a way that might have indicated disappointment or sadness. "Perhaps not. It was many years ago, and you were focused on other concerns at the time." "I do not understand. When could we have met?" This is the first time your people have come to Haven Station. The white scale being moved closer, and Marcus caught a scent that seemed strangely familiar. It was clean and sharp, like ozone after a lightning strike. The memory tickled at the edge of his consciousness, but refused to come into focus. Not Haven Station. The alien said quietly, a smaller place, a mining station on the edge of human space. Station Omega 7. Marcus felt his knees go weak. Omega. 7 had been closed for over 10 years. Its operations moved to more profitable locations. He had not thought about that remote outpost in years, and he certainly had never mentioned it to anyone who might have passed the information to aliens. "How do you know about Omega 7? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because that is where we met, where you found me injured and alone, where you repaired my broken wing, and asked for nothing in return." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Fragments of memory began to surface, images that he had forgotten or dismissed as unimportant. A pale creature trapped in the communication array. Long nights spent carefully setting tiny bones and patching torn membrane. The feeling of satisfaction when the repairs held, and the creature could fly again. The injured animal, Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. But that was just a small creature. "You are—" "I am Prince Kale of the White Scale Empire," the alien said formally. "And I am the creature you saved 15 years ago." Marcus stared at the towering figure before him, trying to reconcile his memories of the small, hurt animal with this powerful being who commanded fleets of warships. "That is impossible. You were no bigger than a dog, and you could not speak. I was young then, barely past the first molting. My voice had not yet developed, and my size was a fraction of what would become. But my mind was fully formed, and I remember everything you did for me." Jake and Lisa had moved closer during the conversation, their eyes wide with amazement. Marcus could see his own shock reflected in their faces as they tried to process what they were hearing. "You risked your safety to help a creature you did not recognize," Prince Kale continued. "You used your skills and resources to heal injuries that were not your responsibility. You asked no payment and expected no reward. When I was ready to leave, you simply let me go." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the implications of what he was learning. "I never knew you were intelligent. I thought you were just an injured animal that needed help, which makes your actions even more remarkable. Humans have a reputation throughout the galaxy for being suspicious of other species, for helping only when there is clear benefit to themselves. Yet you showed kindness to a being you could not even communicate with." The prince moved to Marcus's workbench and picked up the small box that contained the 3 glowing scales. Marcus had kept them there for years without really knowing why. Just another odd memento in a collection of interesting items. "You kept them," Prince Kale said with something that sounded like pleasure in his voice. "The scales I left as a token of gratitude." "I never knew what they were," Marcus admitted. "They just seemed special somehow. I could never bring myself to throw them away." Prince Kale opened the box and lifted out one of the scales. It glowed brighter at his touch, pulsing with soft white light. "These are scales of protection in our culture. They mark you as one who is under royal favor, someone who cannot be harmed without answering to the crown." Marcus looked at the scale with new understanding. All these years, they were some kind of identification? More than that, they were a promise, a debt that could only be repaid when circumstances allowed. The prince carefully placed the scale back in the box and closed it. That time has now come. Lisa found her voice first. "You conquered our station because of Marcus." Prince Kale turned his attention to her, and Marcus was relieved to see kindness in those blue eyes. "Not conquered, protected. Your station was scheduled for incorporation into our empire regardless of Marcus Reed's presence here. But his location influenced how that incorporation would proceed." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would change everything. "The White Scale Empire has been expanding for decades, bringing order and prosperity to systems that were previously chaotic or threatened. We had identified this region of space as strategically valuable and economically promising. Human space was marked for eventual annexation." Marcus felt cold fear creep up his spine. "Annexation?" "Complete absorption into the empire. Your colonies would have been occupied by force, your population relocated as necessary, your resources claimed for imperial use. It would have been efficient, but not pleasant for your people. Jake stepped forward, his young face angry. Then why is this any different? Prince Kale regarded him calmly. Because 15 years ago, a human mechanic showed me that your species possesses something rare in the galaxy. Compassion without expectation of reward. Kindness toward beings that are different and potentially dangerous. These are qualities that the Empire values highly. The prince moved to the window and looked out at the alien ships that surrounded the station. When I learned that Marcus Reed lived in this sector, I personally requested command of the annexation operation. I convinced the Imperial Council that humans might be valuable as partners rather than subjects. Marcus struggled to understand the full meaning of what he was hearing. Partners, an alliance between equals, rather than conquest by superior force. Your people would maintain their independence and self-governance while accepting imperial protection and economic integration. It is a rare arrangement, offered only to species that demonstrate exceptional character. The workshop fell silent as the three humans tried to process the magnitude of what they had just learned. Marcus's simple act of kindness 15 years ago had changed the course of history for the entire human race. All of this, Marcus said slowly, because I help an injured animal? Prince Kale turned back to face him, and Marcus could see something that might have been a smile in the alien's expression. Because you showed me what humans are truly capable of when they follow their better nature. Prince Kale moved to the center of Marcus's workshop and activated a device that projected a three-dimensional map of local space. The holographic display showed dozens of star systems, with human colonies marked in blue and white-scale territories shown in gold. The map made it clear just how completely surrounded human space had become. Your people have been living on borrowed time, Prince Kale explained, gesturing to the display. The Empire's expansion was planned decades ago, long before I was old enough to influence policy. Every star system you see in gold was once independent, with their own governments and cultures. Marcus studied the map with growing dread. The human colonies formed a small cluster of blue, almost completely surrounded by the expanding golden territory of the White-Scale Empire. What happened to all those other civilizations? Some chose to fight. Their resistance was brief and costly. Others attempted to negotiate, but lacked anything the Empire truly valued. Most were eventually absorbed, their populations relocated to serve imperial needs. A few simply fled to distant sectors, abandoning everything they had built. Jake pointed to several empty areas on the map where no markers appeared at all. What about those spaces? Prince Kale's expression grew somber. Former civilizations that chose destruction over submission. The Empire honors such choices, but considers them wasteful. We prefer conquest that preserves resources and populations. Lisa wrapped her arms around herself as if cold. How many people are we talking about? Billions. The White-Scale Empire now encompasses over 400 star systems and 12 major species. Most live productive lives under imperial rule, but few would say they are truly free in the way your people understand freedom. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they were discussing. His simple repair shop suddenly seemed insignificant against the backdrop of galactic conquest and the fate of entire civilizations. How could my helping you change any of that? Prince Kale manipulated the holographic controls, zooming in on human space and highlighting several key colonies. When I returned to my people after you healed my wing, I was still young and without influence, but I never forgot what you had done. As I grew older and gained position within the imperial hierarchy, I began to study human culture and behavior. The display changed to show shipping routes, trade agreements, and communication networks that connected human colonies. I learned that your species possesses something that most others lack. You help strangers without calculating the benefit to yourselves. You risk your safety for beings you do not even know. This compassion is not unique to you, Marcus Reed, but it is far more common among humans than in any other species we have encountered. Marcus thought about the many ship captains he had helped over the years, fixing their vessels even when they could not pay immediately, providing emergency repairs at cost when traders were stranded far from home. He had always considered such actions normal, the way anyone would behave. That seems like basic decency, he said, which is exactly what makes your species remarkable. Most civilizations view such behavior as weakness or foolishness. They help others only when it serves their interests or when social pressure demands it. True altruism is rare in the galaxy. Prince Kale changed the display again, this time showing detailed reports and assessments that had clearly been prepared over many years. I spent decades documenting human behavior, collecting evidence to support my belief that your people deserved a different fate than the usual imperial conquest. When expansion into the sector was finally approved, I requested personal command of the operation. The documents floating in the holographic display were filled with observations about human culture, examples of cooperation between colonies, and detailed analyses of how humans treated other species. Marcus realized that his own actions 15 years ago had triggered an intelligence-gathering operation that spanned decades. The Imperial Council was skeptical. Prince Kale continued. They had seen many species claim to be peaceful and cooperative when facing conquest, only to reveal their true nature once the pressure was removed. But I convinced them to allow me to test my theory through direct contact. Test the how? Marcus asked, though he suspected he might not like the answer. By observing how humans would react to the arrival of our forces. Would you panic and attack, as most species do? Would you attempt to negotiate from weakness, offering anything to preserve your lives? Or would you show the same practical courage that you demonstrated when you found an injured creature you did not recognize? Marcus looked around his workshop, thinking about how he and his apprentices had reacted to the invasion. They had been frightened but not panicked. They had chosen cooperation over futile resistance. They had treated the alien soldiers with cautious respect rather than hatred or fear. You were testing all of us. The entire operation was designed as an assessment. Haven Station was chosen because it represents human civilization at its most typical, not your greatest achievements or your worst failures, but the everyday reality of how your people live and work together. Lisa spoke up with a question that Marcus had been afraid to ask. What would have happened if we had failed your test? Prince Kale's silence stretched long enough to be an answer in itself. When he finally spoke, his voice carried genuine regret. The original annexation plan would have proceeded. Your colonies would have been occupied by force, and your population relocated according to imperial efficiency standards. Some humans would have been allowed to continue their lives in designated areas, but your civilization as an independent entity would have ceased to exist. The weight of that statement settled over the workshop, like a physical presence. Marcus realized that not just his own life, but the future of billions of humans had depended on how a few thousand people on a trading station reacted to alien conquest. But we pass, Jake said, his voice filled with desperate hope. You exceeded every expectation, Prince Kale confirmed. In 3 days of occupation, there have been no acts of violence against our forces, no attempt at sabotage or resistance. Your people have continued their work, maintained order, and treated our soldiers with the same professional courtesy they would show any other visitors. This level of practical cooperation is almost unknown among newly conquered populations. The prince manipulated the display controls again, bringing up a new document that bore official imperial seals and signatures. Based on these observations, I have recommended to the Imperial Council that humanity be offered full alliance status rather than annexation. The offer has been approved. Marcus stared at the document, trying to understand what he was seeing. Alliance status? Your colonies will remain under human government and law. Your people will continue to control their own affairs and make their own decisions. In exchange, you would accept imperial protection from external threats and agree to economic cooperation that benefits both our peoples. The implications were staggering. Instead of conquest and absorption, humanity would become a junior partner in one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. They would keep their freedom while gaining security that their own military forces could never provide. There must be conditions, Marcus said, knowing that nothing in galactic politics was ever simple. Several, but they are reasonable. Human colonies must accept imperial oversight of their military forces to prevent conflicts with other alliance members. Your trade and immigration policies must be coordinated with imperial standards to maintain economic stability. and you must provide specialists and resources to support Imperial projects when requested. Jake frowned as he considered the terms. That sounds like we would still be under your control, just with extra steps. Prince Kale's expression showed what might have been amusement. All alliances involve compromises of absolute independence. But consider the alternative. Under annexation, humans would have no voice in Imperial policy and no control over their own destiny. Under alliance, you retain sovereignty while gaining protection and opportunities that would otherwise be impossible. Marcus thought about the cargo haulers and passenger ships that visited his repair shop, bringing goods and people from across human space. Under Imperial protection, those trade routes would be safer and more profitable. Human colonies would no longer need to fear attack from hostile alien species or raids by pirates operating outside civilized space. What about those who do not want to join your empire at all? Lisa asked. They are free to refuse. Any human colony that prefers independence can maintain their current status. However, they would not receive Imperial protection and would be responsible for their own defense against future threats. Given the realities of galactic politics, few colonies are likely to choose complete isolation. Prince Kale moved closer to Marcus, his blue eyes focusing intently on the human who had unknowingly changed history. But there is one more condition, one that applies specifically to you. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with apprehension. What kind of condition? The Imperial Council requires that the human who inspired this change serve as our primary liaison with your species. You will become the first human ambassador to the White-Scale Empire, responsible for facilitating communication and cooperation between our peoples. The workshop fell silent as Marcus tried to process what he was being asked to do. He was a mechanic, a man who fixed broken machines in a small repair shop. The idea of serving as an ambassador to an alien empire was so far outside his experience that he could barely comprehend it. I do not know anything about diplomacy or politics, he protested. I fix engines and repair navigation systems. I would not know how to represent an entire species. Prince Kale's expression softened in a way that reminded Marcus of the injured creature he had cared for so many years ago. You already have. Your actions 15 years ago represented the best of what humanity could be. Your behavior during the past 3 days has shown that those actions were not an aberration, but a reflection of your true character. The Empire trusts you because you have already proven yourself worthy of that trust. Marcus looked around his workshop at the tools and equipment that had defined his life for so many years. Then he looked at Jake and Lisa, young people whose futures would be shaped by the decision he made in the next few moments. If I accept, what happens to my shop, to my apprentices? Your shop will continue to operate under the supervision of Master Jake and Master Lisa, who have both demonstrated exceptional skill and character. The Empire has great need for skilled mechanics, and they will find no shortage of work. As for you, your new position comes with resources and authority that will allow you to help far more people than you ever could as a simple repairman. Marcus realized that his choice had already been made the moment he decided to help an injured creature outside Station Omega-7. Every act of kindness created obligations and opportunities that rippled outward in ways no one could predict. He had spent 15 years forgetting a simple act of compassion, only to discover that the galaxy had not forgotten. I accept, he said simply. Prince Kale nodded with satisfaction. Then let us begin the work of building a future worthy of the kindness that made it possible.